Hebrews, toward the back of your Bible, the book of Hebrews, chapter 10. And if you'd follow along with me, we'll just stay right here in this passage. Time is short this morning. Hebrews, chapter 10. Hebrews, chapter 10 in your Bibles. And tonight, I'll be here 6:30 for the evening service. That would be great. We'll hear a couple of more I love my church testimonies, and I hope you'll maybe during the day you cross paths with some military folks. Be good to them. It wouldn't hurt any of us to buy somebody's lunch and to look out for those who are looking out for us. And we sure owe a whole lot to our military. Hebrews chapter 10, look at verse 24, and let's stand together as we read just two verses here. If you think about an I love my church Sunday, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the church. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. I'm preaching this morning just what is the church for, or why do we go to church? What's supposed to happen here? Verse 24, let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. And keep your Bible open there. Let's pray. Father, help us this morning. We look to you, dear God, and ask your presence. Lord, all over America, we have a forsaking of the assembling going on. And there are certainly some congregations and some assemblings, but we need a revival of a Bible church, and we just ask your help, please. Teach us. There's a lot of different needs in the room this morning, but you can take care of each individual need. You're a great God, and we look to you today. Help us. I pray you'd provoke us, challenge us, that we might be more for you in Jesus' name. Amen. You can be seated. If you look there with me this morning, he's thinking about why I love my church, and most of the things that people talk about in the last hour and this hour had to do with people doing something for them, people investing in them, people loving them, giving them, and zero conversation back there, fellas, all right? I'll just say it again. Sure a good thing if parents should have their teenagers sit with them. And, of course, you probably never heard me say that before, that and teenagers and cell phones and all that stuff. But let me try starting over. We look at the scriptures and think we know why we love our church, and everybody's got their own thing, whatever area that met their need, help them. But I'd like us to look at what does God say the purpose of the church. There are people who get irritated at a church, and somebody else loves that church. And let's find out what God loves in a church. Look at verse 24. It says, and let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Now we'll go back and we're going to go through this over and over, but understand that verse 24 is tied to verse 25 very clearly. Verse 25 says it's continuing a sentence, it's continuing a thought, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is. It certainly is tied to verse 24. And so verse 24 is the church verse. Verse 24 is this is what church should be. This is what should go on in church. This is what church should be like. And so in verse 24, look at the purpose here. And I just have to skip some of the fun because of all the things that have gone on this morning. But forget the illustrations. Go to the Bible and let us consider one another. Let me start with this. You ought to consider people around you. You ought to think about your next door neighbor. Notice, Sunday morning, your neighbor sees you getting up, going to church. They see you next Sunday morning getting up, going to church. They see some teenager walking out the door and getting in his own car, going on his own, or a teenager getting on a bus and riding that bus to church. You should consider one another. You know that neighbor saw when you didn't go. That neighbor saw when you decided that it wasn't a big deal and you quit going entirely. And see, a lot of what we do about church ought to be considering others. We ought to think about each other. The whole idea of people, they think I'm weird when I tell people don't talk in church. That's called considering one another. When I was a kid back in 1840, and you never talked when an adult was talking. No way. When I was in school, back when we won wars, and the military took care of business, although they were changing that when I was a kid, all of our school principals had a belt or a board. All of them. Those were the good old days. And Dr. Hiles said whenever you got SWATs in his school, you had to sign the board. He said, I learned to write on that board for all the spankings he had. Oh man, we'd go stand outside the principal's window. He had a high window in the back of his office, and we'd stand out there and laugh while our friends were getting SWATs. It was great. And it wasn't me either, just by the way. I was always on the listening side and the laughing. I was the mocker. But not mocking righteousness. I was mocking the fool who got in trouble. But he says there, let us consider one another. Let us consider one another. Think about how is this? We're in such a world of, well, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. I'm going to do what I want. Well, you know what? It does matter what other people think. Because the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. It does matter what your parents think, teenagers. It does matter what the neighbor thinks. It does matter what your coworker thinks. And so here you are, you're driving in the carpool off to work. You ought to consider one another. Look around that carpool. When you get ready to get in the carpool, why don't you pray for them? You don't have to stand up in the front of the van. All right, let's all. You don't have to do that, but you could care. He just says consider. Consider means to think. It means to think about them. It means give some time to them. Have you considered the people around you in church? Have you considered your neighbor? You considered the police. I love the reputation churches have. One day I was in Chicago, and I didn't have a bus driver this Sunday. I was driving my own bus, and we're running around late as most bus captains live. How come bus captains are always late? Isn't it something? It seems like you could be early as easy as late, but it never is. But anyway, you've never been there, you'd know. But I'm driving around picking up kids, and some kid wasn't ready. And I said, I don't know if I have time to come back and get you. I might not, but you get ready, I'll try. And I'm driving around, and all of a sudden I realize if I turn up here and go down there, I can go by this kid's house or that kid's house. Before I even thought, I swung the bus up that road, and right about 45 degrees into that turn, I realized it's a one-way street. That's why I never went that way. So, old days, no automatic transmissions, push in the clutch, jam it into reverse, start backing up, and then look in the mirror. That's not the right order. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the police car behind me as I'm backing up into the police car from the wrong direction on the one. I didn't hit him, though. Thank God for that. So I just stopped. They just shut the motor off, opened the door, and waited. He came in, got on the bus, looked at the kids, looked at my driver's license, looked around, shook his head, said, drive more careful, walked away. He knew First Baptist Church. He knew those buses were a help to that community. He knew we were on the right side. And see, we ought to consider one another. Think about it. Look, there's a world watching me. I've got no right to live my own life. Consider. I remember we had our high school senior class. We were at Disneyland, and we'd been on the senior trip. And I said, look, you get in, get started. One of the other, I think Dave Erickson was with me that trip, but one of our men was with me. And I ran over to a drugstore to try and get this is a long time ago, to get you know what film is? I was getting the film developed. In the old days, and there was film. But anyway, I don't think it was digital things. But anyway, I was going to get our pictures developed because we were going to share them. And I walked in, and they didn't have 1 hour photo. I thought I'd get it done while we were at Disneyland, and they didn't. And here I am. I'm 100 miles from home or 50 miles from home in a place I had no idea where I was. I didn't know anybody around there. And I could have gone and drank what I wanted, bought what I wanted, looked at what I wanted. But I went from the camera counter, started walking out, and I hear this voice clear across the store. Hello, Pastor. And it was the mom of one of the girls that rides our bus. And she'd visited our church off and on, but the girl lived here. Mom lived in Anaheim, worked at that store. And I thought, well, I'm glad I wasn't where Don Foster would have been. Consider. You know, people really do matter. They do matter. And we go through life acting like our spouse doesn't matter, our kids don't matter, our parents don't matter. Look at that verse again. And let us consider one another. Now remember what he's talking about, church. He isn't just talking about your lifestyle. Oh, that's all scriptural. That's biblical preaching. But right now we're talking about church. When you consider people, you ought to be in church. You ought to consider what church you go to. You ought to consider how you act in church, how you treat people. You know, this morning, I don't know how many people here, 1,000, 1,200 people probably floating around the property. And when you get out of the car, I guarantee you this, you walk by a broken heart. There's some kid who heard their parents screaming at each other last night, maybe saw mom getting beat up. There's somebody who's a divorce is in the making. There's somebody on this property who's got a terrible job situation, a layoff. There's some senior citizen whose grandkids or great-grandkids are in a horrible mess. And you walked right by them and didn't consider them. You got to consider one another. That's why I try to not walk by one kid that comes on our buses or our own children that parents come. I try to not walk by one child without speaking to them. You know why? Consider. Church is a place to consider one another. You know what? Teenagers, the word considerate. Just considering that person. This is not about me. Consider it. And so he says there in verse 24, let us consider one another. Now, not only should we be consider it to consider one another, he goes on, he says to provoke one another to love and to good works. Now, that word provoke is similar to a kick in the pants. To consider them, to provoke them. And so church is a place where we provoke people. I've heard people say, I go to church and I feel guilty there. And I say, well, that's good. Anything else you like about church? You say, well, I don't like that about church. I don't like feeling guilty. Well, no one does, but you need to. If you don't feel guilty, if you do feel guilty, there obviously is something that you're guilty of. And if you'd stop it, you wouldn't feel guilty anymore. So the feeling guilty is not the preacher's fault. Anyhow, provoke one another. Say, boy, I brought some friends. Always, you bring a friend, I'm preaching on their personal life, their background. Say, how do you know? Because the devil leads me, or God, one or the other, but I'm hoping it's God. Provoke. Church ought to be a place where you're provoked. Church ought to be a place you're pushed. Church ought to be a place where you're, but what does it say there? Look at the end of verse 24. Provoke one another. By the way, it's not just me, it's you. Provoking one another to love and to good works. Two quick things about this, and then there's 75 points after that. Provoke one another to love. One of the things I love about our church is the emphasis on the home. Now, it starts in the pulpit, but I'll tell you what, it goes everywhere else too. It's in our adult Sunday schools. It's in our youth department. You talk to our teenagers or to our adults who grew up in our youth department, our married people who grew up in our youth department will tell you they heard preaching on the home by the hour before they were married. You go to teen camp with us, you're hearing preaching on the home. You go to summer camp, winter camp, we're going to talk about what a home should be. What a home should be. Why? Because that world out there is trying to convince our kids that home is a horrible place and an immoral place and a shameful place. They're ruining the role models that God has set up in the Word of God. The church ought to be a place where we provoke one another to love. It'd bother me if our divorce rate was the same as the world, and it's not, by the way. You take our church over the last 20 years, our divorce rate is almost down to zero. And I don't feel bad or I don't feel ill toward those who've had a broken marriage of our own or others. There's been very few here, but a lot of wonderful people have come to our church from a broken heart, broken life, and we love them. That's what the church is for. It's not a museum for righteous relics. It's a hospital for sick sinners. This is a place where people are loved. But let me tell you something. Let's teach you how to love. On this side, we've got people they want to be loved. And so from over here, we'll say, yes, we do love you. Let us express our love. But by the way, let me teach you how to love. Don't just be on the taking side. And this is a church, and any Bible church, Bible preaching church ought to be a place where we provoke one another. Men ought to feel like they're learning how to love their wife better. And wives ought to be taught how to love their husbands better. Kids ought to learn how to treat their parents, and kids ought to learn how to treat each other. That's what love is. That's what a church is. This church ought to push you and push you and push you to love. But love is not just a feeling, it's an action. To provoke one another to love and to good works. This next weekend's a great example. I love these days. One Sunday when we were off, we had church all over the community, church service everywhere. I preached and got out of here, got in my car, and I went to several different places. I brought my camera. If anybody needed a preacher, I'd preach, but I try not to. I remember watching one of our men, a construction worker, and there were probably 200 to 250 people seated. And here's one of our men, big, much more comfortable with a hammer than a Bible in his hand, although he's very comfortable with the Bible too. But here he is preaching to 200 to 250 people, And I'm just sitting here thinking, I love my church because people are provoked to love and to good works. Look at that. Let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. This thing, church ought to be a place that pushes us and pushes us to serve. You want to do something great next week? Go join somebody and hand out snow cones, pass out flyers, bring some hot dogs. Say, well, I don't know if I have time, or I don't feel good, or I'm old, my health's bad. All right, put some money in the plate at the end of the service and help us buy groceries. You might not be physically able to ride on a bus like you used to, but you can sure put $1 in for a can of green beans. And those green beans will go in a bag with some other food, and those groceries will be given to somebody, and a bunch of somebodies are going to get saved next week. Why? Because you did good works. That's what church is all about. Church is not about all of us sitting here being spectators because there's a great band playing and the light show is cool and the kids can talk all during the service because there's nothing, you're not interrupting anything. Hey, this is not about entertainment. This is about work. This is a place to be trained, to be equipped, to be encouraged, to be loved. Why? So that we'll go do something for the King of Glory. My life's not about me. And the whole Christian life is a life of others. And so, first of all, in verse 24, let us consider. Think about those around you. Think about those people that you go to work with and you live nearby in your neighborhoods. And yesterday I was knocking on doors out in Menifee, in a new housing tract, a small area. I don't think anybody knocked on doors yet. And I was knocking on doors and on a whole street. Talked to two people. One said, I introduced myself, offered a tract. They took it, said thank you, and shut the door. I thought, well, that was really good. The power of God was present in that place. I'm sure they got saved after I left. But anyway, and the next one, I introduced myself. She said, and I gave her a tract. I said, are you going to church anywhere? She said, I used to go to this church. And I said, really? She's waving the tract at me. I said, so you know who I am? She said, yes. I said, what's your name? How come I don't know you? She said, well, I kind of slip in, slip out. No one knew who I was. And we chatted a little bit. So I got one person saved that was already saved and one who didn't want to talk to me. But I want that neighbor, that world out there to know us. We ought to consider people around us and talk to them and invite them to church. And we here in church ought to consider one another. Realize there's a lady trying to raise children alone. Realize there's a man who's trying to figure out how to pay the bills for his family. Would love to put his kids in a Christian school. And how's he going to do it? How's he going to come up with the money? Consider one another and to love one another, to provoke each other to good works. And if you're going somewhere next Sunday, find somebody around you and say, hey, why don't you go with me next week? Provoke them. And they might say, well, I don't know. And you say, well, you ought to. You heard the preacher. And provoke them. Do something. Let's go on. Verse 24, to provoke one another to love and to good works. Verse 25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is. Now let me explain. I'm in church this morning, and because they're passing a plate for groceries, I take my dollar out and I put it in the offering. If I forsake the assembling of myself with others, you know what happens? That dollar goes into a Coke, or that dollar goes into a Starbucks, or whatever, a Red Box or something like that. And you know what? We ought to provoke. Well, we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. Why? Because we can get some things done. Do you know today there are Christians everywhere out of church, and they have forsaken the assembling. Their life could make such a difference. Their dollar could make a difference, but their time could make a difference. That we've got grandmas in our nursery. They don't change diapers. All they do is rock babies. What a great job. You know, that's kind of like a dad. And they don't do very much rocking either. But here we are. There's so many places to serve. We've got grandmas who vacuum floors here at church, wash windows. Just to say, I'm going to take my life and provoke one another. And look, here you are. You get out of church, and some of you, the devil's going to have something happen, or something will happen because you're around humanity. And I say something, somebody else doesn't greet you, or somebody treats you mean. Or first Sunday, one of our men, very faithful man, came to our church the very first Sunday. He said someone ran into his car and then drove off. First dent my car had was in the church parking lot. Don't do that. That's provoking us to bad works, like punching people out. But something's going to happen to you. You get to church. It's funny, first Sundays, another one of our men, first Sunday, couldn't find his kid. He had several kids in Sunday school. He didn't understand our bus ministry, so he thought, well, maybe my kid's in one of the buses. It was water fight Sunday. And this is a business owner. He walks up. He sticks his head in a bus, and right as he puts his head in, a bucket of water hits him. First time at Faith Baptist. Welcome to the church that loves people. Something dumb and little like that's going to happen to you. And you're going to get out of church, and here you're going to be. Now, you might have a reason to be out of church. Let me tell you something. You're not working anymore. See, the devil doesn't care why you get out of church. He just doesn't want you over here doing good works. We're not perfect here. And you don't have to look beyond 2 or 3 pews around you to find weakness and struggles and heartaches. But I'll tell you what, we ought to provoke one another to love and to good works. That's what Christianity is all about. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner is. But look at the end of that. And we got to close this. We're running out of time this morning. Look at the end of verse 25. Not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some is. But look at this now. Exhorting one another. Exhorting one another. And so much the more as you see the day approaching. Now Tim, you're the closest teenager. I'm sorry. There's no other teenagers up front. Let me show you the difference. See, in verse 24, it says that we ought to provoke one another. And in verse 25, it says exhorting one another. Come here, Tim. This is provoking one another. Turn around. That's provoking one another. This is exhorting one another. Hey, you want to go with me on my bus route? Come on, that'll be great. We ought to be exhorting one another. There's a place for both. There ought to be a kick in the seat of the pants, and there ought to also be a, come on, we can do this. We can do this. Let's do this together. Thank you, Tim. I met with some of you teenage guys this week, and I don't think I kicked you hard enough. But I know I exhorted you. We need you. We don't need any casualties. We don't need anybody else not in church. We don't need any more young men out in the world. You know, the world's got all the young men it can use to destroy. Come on, that's exhorting. And you know, sometimes as a parent, some of you dads, you're really good on the provoking, but you're kind of weak on the exhorting. And others of you, you're real exhorters, and you wouldn't know provoke if it hit you square in the mug. There's a place for both. And knowing where, it's hard to say. Ask your wife, she'll tell you. Say, how do they know? They have a crystal ball. They know everything. I'm teasing. I'm just provoking now. But look at the end of that verse 25. He says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. People get out of church and they've forsaken the assembly. They're still Christians. They're going to heaven. They're not bad people, but they're not helping. They're not making anything happen for God. You know what? Sunday morning, Tad over here, Saturday morning, he's taking some people at 6 in the morning, and they're gonna go looking for day laborers. If somebody would make a bunch of breakfast burritos, wrap them in foil, put them in an ice chest, get them to him Saturday morning early, they'll stay hot in an ice chest. It knows how to keep it hot. It knows how to keep it cold. And the question is, how do it know? But anyway, we won't go there. Private joke. But anyhow, your breakfast burrito, your 2 dozen eggs and some cheese and tortillas, he's going to go with pots of coffee to these day laborers. And you go to a place where they're all standing around and say, come on over, coffee and breakfast burritos. They're going to come, they're going to stand there and drink the coffee, eat the burritos, and hear the gospel preached. You say, how many people can you get? As many as you have burritos. And we were down in San Diego, or in Escondido some years ago. Several of the men here were with me. I was the coward in the group. And we gave away groceries. We gave away turkeys. I preached in a motel in the parking lot. We had people everywhere. I mean, it was unbelievable. What a great day we had. We ran out of all the groceries. All the turkeys were gone. All the groceries are gone. And I said, what are we going to do? It was late. It was dark, 7, 8, 9 o'clock. We stayed late. And they said, well, we got this box full of homemade burritos. They said, no one's eating a burrito someone else made and put in foil in a cardboard box, and you knocked on their door? I said, you're crazy. They got all kinds of people to come and hear the gospel preach. Hey, come on outside. I got these homemade burritos. I don't know who made them, but they've been in the car for about 5 hours, but they're great. people came out, and there were more people getting saved, thanking us, thanking them. Thank you for coming to my house. There's one place, it's a government facility, a military something. It had a big thing over the entrance. We had said, no admission without prior government permission. This includes law enforcement. And they said, let's go in. I said, I'm parking the van right out here. Oh, wait, I wasn't going in there. It was Saturday night. I'm not getting arrested on Saturday night. Sunday night, maybe, but not Saturday night. Those guys went in there with their old, cold, day-old breakfast burritos. They had people hugging them, loving them, hey, come on in, sit down. People getting saved. Provoking to love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling ourselves together. Look, folks get out of church. They're not giving any breakfast burritos. They're not buying any green beans. They're not bringing any turkeys to church. They're not handing out snow cones. They're not giving out some cotton candy or some popcorn. They're not handing out tickets. They're not sitting next to somebody in the convalescent home next Sunday afternoon, sitting there holding the book for the person in the wheelchair so that person feels like somebody on this earth loves them, and then they hear a gospel message and hear how to get saved. Exhort one another. Exhorting him is, hey, look, you never been on a big day? You come with me. This will be great. Come on and join us. First hour, Todd Schuyler spoke. If you want to see something happen, you go follow Todd Schuyler. I mean, all of our workers do amazing things, but Todd Schuyler, he's almost deaf, and so his speech, you might notice his speech is a little off, but it's because he can't hear real well, and he's had to learn to speak without hearing like we would. Todd's phenomenal. And he'll go places and do things that nobody with any sanity would go. And the one I wish we had on video was when he went to the umpire at a actually being played baseball game, Little League, and he went and said to the umpire, this is what we're doing, explain what we're doing, give him the gospel, all this. The umpire stopped the game, said, this guy's got something to say, and put Todd Schuyler out there in the infield and let him preach to the fans and both teams. Unbelievable. Just crazy. You know what? That's stuff to talk about when you're walking down the golden streets of the New Jerusalem. What are these guys going to talk about? I had a 72-inch big screen TV. Yeah, that's nice. We'll watch the Super Bowl at your mansion. No, get over here. You know what church is for? It's a place to provoke one another. It's a place to provoke us to love more. It's a place to provoke us to work more. And it's a place to exhort, to put that arm around the shoulder saying, come on, you could do this. You know what I need? I need probably 3 more mechanics on Saturdays. All right, Brother Mike? Just to be gophers. You don't have to be mechanics. We got mechanics. We need people that'll help them. How could I work? Just go hang around Mike Jacobson. Don't get around Don House. He'll provoke you. Mike Jacobson's going to be crowned in heaven for working with Don House. We need 3 or 4 bus drivers, more bus drivers. Get your bus driving license. It's not hard. We'll pay for it. We'll train you. Or you could forsake the assembly. But I would rather exhort one another. What's my job as a pastor? To exhort you. To exhort you to whatever you can do, do it. Whatever you could do, you should do. Because that's what church is all about. It is not a spectator sport. It's a place to be trained to serve the King. Let's pray. Father, bless us today. Oh, Lord, we think of how much this church has accomplished through the fine men and ladies and the teenagers, just mountains of work. The gospel preached on the streets and public parks, in rented rooms, in little community centers. Thank you, Lord, for the missionaries that have been supported, and now our young people on the mission field. Lord, we want to be a church that provokes to love and to good works. May our church always be a place where married folks should be provoked to be better at loving one another. May it be a place where we learn to work better. May our young people realize that they're going to need to be provoked, to stay on track, to know what love is and to know what good works are. And then may we exhort and encourage one another just to put that arm around the shoulder and say, let's do this together. We can make this happen. Bless us. May our church always be a church like this, a church that you love, You told the church in Ephesus you left your first love, and you said that they needed to get back to their works that they'd forgotten. May we not ever be in that place, Lord. Bless us. Help us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together just for